Everybody, Pete Harris here. Time for another installment of David Lee Roth's Crazy from the Heat. And for this installment, in order to better justify and honor David Lee Roth's spirit of adventure, I'm going to read this excerpt of the book while careening down this road in my small and relatively unsafe car. So here we go. In 1975, the great Bob Marley came to the United States for the first time. He had several albums already, but the one that really just smacked it over the left field fence was Natty Dread. And he came to the United States on his first real tour, and played at the Roxy on Sunset Boulevard. I had a stack of posters for some show we were doing somewhere, a party somewhere, and I determined pretty much on the basis of the haircut that Bob Marley would be a good audience for us to advertise at. So I went down to the Roxy, and it was February. It was freezing cold in LA. I had all my posters up under my shirt, and tape and glue and everything so the cops wouldn't catch me. And I stood outside the back brick wall of the Roxy, watched everybody go in. Ringo walked in. Ike and Tina walked in. The Stones guys walked in. You know, all the local television, movie people, what have you. It was a stellar crew. I stood outside that brick wall, and there was a big poster of Bob Marley with that haircut, those dreadlocks, Bob Marley with a spliff, Natty Dread. I froze my ass off and fired every car in the parking lot, and then listened to the entire show. And he would go on forever, major pot smoker. And I was out there for damn near 3.5 hours. I listened to every note of that show through that brick wall, and I swore to myself that someday, I was going to smoke joints that big. New York City, 1986. A pal and I were just coming by helicopter from the Liberty Island Festival. We landed at 32nd Street Heliport on the East River, and I'm wearing the spandex with the boots up to the knees and the Prince Valiant haircut. My pal says, "Geez, Dave, this is like Pimpville. This is dangerous turf." I says, "It's cool, man. It's cool." A few minutes later, a cop car pulls up and throws the lights on us. "All right, you guys, hold it right there," because we're colorfully dressed, to say the least. He checks our IDs and he says, "David Lee Roth, what are you doing around here? This is Hookerville, man." "Staying over at the Plaza Hotel." Cop says, "Hey, you want a ride? Jump in the car, you guys. We'll give you a ride to the Plaza Hotel." He and his partner were fans. As we're driving along, one of them says to me, "Hey, want to play a little game?" I says, "Sure, I love games." He says, "Here, put these handcuffs on. We're going to walk you into the precinct station." It's the 13th precinct, I think. It's Halloween. It's like a zoo in there. He walks us through, and every skell, every transvestite, every kind of pimp, hooker is in there, in costume. And as we walk through the crowd, everyone gets really silent. And the night sergeant, sitting at the desk, looks at me in my striped pants and my haircut and everything and says, "What'd you get him in here for?" It's dead silent in the whole precinct station because everybody knows who we are. The cop turns around, looks at me, he says, "I don't know, sir. We found him down by 32nd Street. He says he's just a gigolo." I was born in Bloomington, Indiana, October 10th, 1954. My active memory starts when I was 2 years old. I remember sitting in a high chair. I remember I had to wear Dennis Brown splints, braces on my legs. I had to sleep with them too. So immediately I had a major traumatic thing happen. I couldn't crawl around. Wore them until I was 4 or 5. That was not a happy point in my life because at the same time, I had every kind of food allergy you can possibly imagine. Eating sugar is like doing blow for me. You'll get 20 minutes of my best material, and then I gotta go to sleep. Who knew that in the 60s? Jesus, my mother was feeding me Jello water, which only increased my hyperactivity. I paid a lot of attention to the television set, and I also started reading. I didn't really have a choice. There wasn't a lot of running up and down the proverbial field for me. I had a little stack of records, vinyl records, West Side Story, Gypsy, so I always paid attention to those records. The Limbo was very popular. Virgin Islands, steel drums. It was very happening because it suggested the tropics. Of course, all the servicemen returning home after the Second World War, everybody that had been stationed in the Westpac fleet, West Pacific with Pacific Rim, and so forth, came back with tiki torches and tiki masks to put in the backyard. Everywhere you went, there'd be a Trader Vic's or Trader Joe's kind of thing. So the whole idea of going into the territory, like Mark Twain put it, was always very relevant to me. I wanted to dance. I wanted to sing. I wanted to make some attention because I had to lay around in front of the TV for so long. Got sent to my first psychiatrist when I was 6 years old because I was super active, well off into the creative aspect of things, and at the same time I was a little jock. I loved to read. I loved to paint. I loved to learn. Learning to this day is sacred to me. But you couldn't join the two. You were either a jock or an egghead. Nobody knew what to do with me. Plus, I was Jewish. Back in the 60s, I was a minority. Pop started college, right out of the Air Force. I remember he had this little room upstairs where he would study, where he had his books, his papers. My mom had no idea what to do with me. Ultimately, we started moving around a fair amount as he pursued his medical schooling, an internship, and residency. We lived in the great outdoors. Bloomington, Indiana is a college town. It still is a college town. John Cougar Mellenhead lives there. We moved to Newcastle, Indiana, which is where my grandparents had settled. All four of my grandparents are Russian immigrants. My great-grandfather rode cavalry in the Lithuanian service. Grandpa Joe never did learn to speak much English, and he died in Florida, plopped down under his mango tree. A lot of us maintained that he was just so pissed at the Cubans. Grandma Roth kept a kosher house, separate place for milk products and meat and whatever. Go over and eat the classic fare, which is brisket, matzo balls, gefilte fish, fruit salad. I hated it. It was scary. There was nothing to do. I had to get dressed up, go see Grandma and Grandpa. Grandma died when she was 99. It was a very disciplinary background for my father. I don't know how many uncles and aunts I've got on his side, 4 or 5. Pop's an ophthalmologist, eye surgeon. And they grew up in probably the linchpin of anti-Semitism, the breadbasket of the United States. So where do you go? You go to the movies. Pop was always going to the movies as a kid and dreaming, and losing himself into that and reading. There was always many, many books in our house as I was growing up. Ultimately, they became my best friends, and I read everything. By the time I was 13, I'd already read the Quran and Lenny Bruce's autobiography, How to Talk Dirty and Influence People. It was Lenny who said, "Someday the Russians are going to be gone, and they're going to be our friends. And then we're going to turn our hatred onto ourselves and our public people and our own celebrities." It's precisely what's going on now. Anyway, Pop related to me by movies, books. We would go to the movies together. I think the first picture I remember going to see was Steve Reeves in Hercules Unchained. I think I was 5 years old. So I said, "Great, I get it. I'll be Steve Reeves when I grow up. I'll be Hercules." Mom had sensibility and the sense of humor. My dad always taught me, stay cool. Mom always taught me, you can do it. When I was 7, in Indiana, Pop got an old farmhouse to live in, as kind of a caretaker, some kind of rent scenario. There was cropland all over, 2-lane blacktop leading to it, horses, a great big lake in the back with swans in it. There was a foreman named Gene, the kind of guy that puts Vaseline in his hair, smoked Camels, and would roll the pack up in the sleeve of his t-shirt. He was great, became my mentor. Taught me how to spit. Seriously. The kind of guy that, when it was raining, would put on his rain slicker jacket and his rain slicker pants, but no hat, and run to the door and say, "I got to tend to the horses." And he'd be dripping wet from the rain, with his hair all on his face. I thought it was just the greatest thing, man. Gene didn't never have to wear no hat, man. He was a man's man. I also began to develop my own sense of fashion. I remember I had a little ring from the bottom of a Cracker Jack box. I showed Gene while he was baling hay one day, and he told me, "You know what? I knew a little guy just like you once. In fact, he had a ring just like that one." I said, "Yeah? Could he bale hay good?" He said, "Yeah, well, he could up until he caught his ring in the thresher and it tore his arm off." To this day, I wear no jewelry, ever, and I got all my digits. Gene and I would go down to the lake and hunt muskrat, ugliest damn creature on God's earth. It was great. I was a man, just like in the books, went hunting, and I would run. Running was always my thing. As soon as I got those braces off, I was running. And I got my taste of the great outdoors, which has always been important to me. I remember determining that work was the way up. because everywhere I turned, folks was working. Pop was always studying. The foreman was always digging a hole or filling it up. The whole story of the Roth family is one of travel and industry. Picked up on that early on. We moved to the East Coast when I was about 6 years old. We lived in Swampscott, Massachusetts, a little right by the ocean. My only best pal was my sister Lisa. She's 3 years younger than me. Several things happened at that point in time. First, and most memorable, my folks sent me off to the child guidance clinic. Instantly, I realized that there was something wrong with me. Nobody else I knew had to go to the child guidance clinic and talk to a shrink. I would sit in the waiting room and hang onto the chair for all I was worth. Psychiatrist would have to come upstairs and say, "Now, Dave, why don't you just come on down? We'll just play some games or something. We'll just draw some pictures." I was on to him early. I knew that something was up. Ultimately, after almost a year of that, I did go downstairs into his office and sit there silently. They might have thought I was autistic because I would just sit there silently, refusing all his ministrations, all of his questions, anything at all. One day he said, "I'll tell you what, we'll play a game of catch. We don't have to talk. We'll throw the ball." I know how to throw a ball, and I can remember quite vividly that first ball game. It was called He Throws Me the Ball, and I Throw it at His Head as hard as I possibly can. That was my introduction to sports.